our next speaker is Gilad Bracha, and going to talk about apps and their stores.
All right, a few preliminary remarks. First of all, whoever scheduled me after Eric, if there is any justice in this world, you will pay for that. But other than that, you will note that there are two side-by-side displays of these slides, and that is not an oversight. That's deliberate for reasons that should become evident very shortly. So this is a history, an alternate history, but it is, as they say in the movies, based on a true story, as you'll see. So whenever you deal with a history, there is a question of where does history begin? And in our case, it's going to begin at the end or close to the end. Not quite the end, but the end is in sight. And what do I mean by that? What is the end that I have in mind here? So you might have noticed that these two presentations are tracking. So this is Chrome, and this is Safari. So these are two separate browsers, two separate web browser implementations, and the slides are in sync. And sync is one of the major themes of this talk, because that is sort of the end for my purposes, right? This is the end goal that I've had for many, many years, which is that my view is that things like collaboration and local firsts or synchronization of replicas that go on and offline and things like that should be the responsibility of the platform, of the programming system, not the responsibility of the individual program or application that wants that to happen in their space. And that is the story that, the history that we're going to explore here, or at least a large part of it. But we're beginning at the end because it's finally in sight. At least part of this is working. Mostly thanks to other people's work. Yoshiki's right there. But what is happening here is this presentation is a docu-app in Ampleforth for those who saw the talk on Monday. So it is basically a system for live documents that this presentation is constructed in on top of the Newspeak platform. And the Newspeak ID is integrated into here. And we can, let's take the other one. We can click on the home screen, and I'll probably make those bigger because that's the thing. The slide size of this side are not the same. Is that decent? Yeah, okay. A little bigger, okay. The problem is, of course, that eventually this will get out of hand because, you know, there's not enough real estate when we have to. Well, the thing is we want both of them that way. So, yeah, okay. So, again, you can get into the IDE from here because when you program these live documents, some things are not possible to do by just dragging and dropping, and you actually need real code. And so in this thing, you have full access to the namespace of the IDE. And this is a list of all the top-level classes, the modules in the IDE. And you can go look at them. Now, some things, you know, do not sync, and that's deliberate. Well, it's a combination of path of least resistance and deliberate. And so there's good reasons for letting individual clients scroll to where they want independently. You can debate that. There's good reasons for them to zoom independently. But it's also, some of these things are harder to do than others. But we can go and look at classes. And this is a class that deals with UI. And inside here, we'll see that they have the same class. And there are nested classes here that are individual components. And so you can browse all this stuff. And then you can go back to the root. There's a history thing. And you can do other things, right? Everything the IDE can do. So if we say want to run some tests, there's a unit test framework. And the point of this is that I'm showing you all this is not to tell you about the Newspeak IDE, but to show that, in fact, this entire thing is synchronizing, and it's working in both these browsers. And I only have one machine, but it works across the internet, across machines, and all that sort of thing. And it's actually fairly responsive. So if you open up all these methods, right, these are the successful tests, which aren't shown by default because no one ever cares about your successes, only about your failures. And so we can open these, and that does take a little bit, but here they are, right? All these methods open up. So generally speaking, the IDE basically works collaboratively. You can evaluate things, you can type live in a window, and you can evaluate things, and you get, object inspectors, they work, right, that sort of thing. And so all of this stuff is not because I went and built a collaborative IDE. That's the point. Because this idea has been around for a while. The presentation tool I built fairly recently on top of it, and none of this has ever been collaborative or was made collaborative, and no source code was harmed during making them collaborative, right? This is the same source code as the non-collaborative version. It's the same bytecode as the non-collaborative version. Not one character has changed. So how is it collaborating? It's collaborating because the platform is doing this work, and that's the idea. Now this is an early experimental demo, and if anything goes wrong, it wasn't me, but this is not ready for prime time by any means, but it is basically showing that this is plausible, and this is all utilizing the work of Croquet that people like Yoshiki have been doing, and if you saw his talk on Tuesday. But it's very different from the way Croquet was intended to be used, and in fact, I'm not sure that Yoshiki approves at all of what I'm doing. So the way the Croquet system is supposed to be used is, right, it's in JavaScript now. It's a descendant, of course, of the original in Smalltalk. But either way, you write your collaborative program, fully aware that you're writing a collaborative program, and you make calls out to Croquet, and you subclass Croquet classes, and you do things, and it's design, and you make this thing collaborative on purpose. You don't just take something that was never designed to be collaborative and flip a switch and suddenly it is collaborative, which is what I'm doing here and rather proud of. So we're doing something different here, and I don't necessarily have a lot of time in this talk to go into how I'm doing it, but it is something that potentially you could do in other systems, but it is way, way easier to do in Newspeak. And so the underlying platform, for example, the UI, the built-in UI library is taking care of this. So you basically swap out in Newspeak one platform object for another. The platform object that has the collaborative UI will make sure that all the regular applications unchanged will run collaboratively. So that's kind of the core idea here. The end game is to make synchronization and to go beyond what Croquet does, because the original motivation was not necessarily this real-time live collaboration, which is very nice, but the local first, the ability to go offline and go online. And that's what I'm going to talk about a bit more. So if we go back to our slides and maybe make them a bit smaller again. All right. So we should now start and go back to the beginning, because this is part of the end or close to the end. When this works perfectly and is solid, and we figure out the local first stuff, that is the end game. And if I'm lucky, in a year I'll come back and have something more. But this is also the end of the happy part, right? This is a story, and it is not, and I'm hoping it has a happy ending, which is what we showed you, where all of this will work and be really cool. But in general, it is not a happy story. It is a story of industrial woe and short-sightedness and bitterly looking back. That's what I'm here for. So where does the story begin? It is a tale of folly, and it begins appropriately on April Fool's Day 2004. And the particular folly we are concerned with is this is the day, very appropriately, that Gmail got launched. And I, early on, was very enthusiastic and was an early user of Gmail. And I very, very quickly, within a matter of 30 minutes or so, went through, grief, denial, disappointment, et cetera, and decided this is not what I want. I was, on the one hand, immensely impressed by, wow, you can do this in a web browser. I had no idea back in 2004 that this was plausible. They're very clever people. But on the other hand, it was also very clear that it is not what I wanted. And this led to some thinking which resulted in a vision of what I wanted. which is this thing that I've talked about in the past multiple times, and some of you may have seen these talks or heard about them, this idea of objects as software services, with this idea of orthogonal synchronization, which interpreted, there was a more narrow and specific interpretation of that originally, but basically the idea being that the platform or the programming language will take care of sync for you, right? And so, you know, that idea, the first discussion of it publicly was in the Dynamic Language Symposium in 2005. I gave a keynote 19 years ago. And then that one was not recorded, but there are recorded talks for anyone who's interested. You know, talks I gave at Google, at Microsoft Research. There, you know, look at my website. But the earliest presentation of this has never been shown publicly. It is this presentation, and now to show you that this is a sad story, we're going to go to PowerPoint. And after that, when we come back, we'll also see some of the bugs in this system. So, ta-da, PowerPoint. Oops, why are you doing that? Okay, it's showing for you, good enough. So this is this is a PowerPoint, an original PowerPoint from 2005, period styling, unchanged, that I had, that was used, was shown to venture capitalists. One of the, as I tried to get this idea off the ground, I did several things, and we'll talk about them, but one of them is with my friend and colleague Yohan Kashai, we actually tried to raise money to do something commercial with this thing. And these are the slides that we used. At least this is one set of those slides. And so we were calling these things rich internet apps. There wasn't really good terminology back then. And this is a space that's divided, as you can see. There's enterprise versus consumer. This is little applets versus applications, and desktop and mobile, right? And this is of course for VC. So this is a bit of a marketing spiel, but again, this is an industry academic collaboration. So some industrial waste should be used. So anyway, what the state of affairs back then was mainly the big players were Java and .NET, and they're focused on enterprise. And there's very little elsewhere, and the thing manifests on the desktop. Right? That's where the UI shows up, right? And there's nothing in mobile. When you look at mobile, well, there's very little, but there was something. Anyone remember J2ME? Right? Yeah, okay, yes, I know the old guys remember, but so Java on the mobile device, believe it or not, that was a thing back then. And it ended up where it belonged. And you know, but we had to illustrate the space. And what we were interested in was this red zone, which is entirely in consumer, mostly in mobile, and dealing with real applications. So applications for consumer on mobile, you begin to smell the app store that's in the title here. So we were interested in portable, you know, personal information, things that centered around your basic data, your personal data, addresses, contacts, calendars, etc. And we argued that there would be a lot of add-on applications that would stem for that, tools to make that easier and things like that, which was a bit of a stretch back then, right? Because, you know, envisioning what those might be, I'll show you one example of this as we go along. The other thing that's important was this is a slogan for this vision: always available, always up to date. Which basically means that, yes, it's available everywhere, like a web application. You can get it through the network and run it on all your devices. And the other thing is that it works online and offline, right? This is very much in line with the modern local first movement, though there are differences, right? And the idea is that when you get back online, it synchronizes, right? Automatically. You don't have to write it. The platform will do this. That's the kind of idea. And the result of that is also people wouldn't have to worry about versions. That's something I liked about the web thing, that, you know, there's no old versions that you can go and ask the consumer, what are you running now? You're running whatever's on the web page. And that meant that that stemmed from the fact that we're synchronizing not just the data, but the program. So there's always, you know, we're always up to date. Okay, I'm kind of going to zoom through this so I don't end up over time. This is probably something we can skip. But here's an example, and this touches on another one of the points of this talk, which is sort of the siloing of applications, which is closely related to some of the stuff I mentioned in my talk on Monday about live documents and transclusion and stuff. So what you have here, right, you have someone has a calendar, and they have a flight on a particular day. Now the first thing is that the flight should not be just saying, oh, I have a flight on that day. It should actually be a live thing that you can actually go and click on and explore your itinerary and everything, right? And it should be there in the context of your calendar. And if you, say, decide that you'd like to know what the weather is at your destination, you take a widget and you drag it in there. And this was inspired, by the way, by Morphic in Squeak, the idea that the way that you can easily compose these things, but also with semantics, not just the visuals. And the idea that the weather button would be a thing that would look at its context. There would be an API to get at your context, and it would look for dates and times and places, and so it would know where your thing is. And so the idea here is that these are apps that are customizable by the end user interactively, say on the desktop, but then this thing will continue to work on your mobile and so forth. And so again, no siloing. This is another more hand-wavy thing that I'm not sure we ever figured out how we would do, but something to do with the templates for this thing is that we would then infer that you probably wanted this weather button in your other calendar entries, right? Now this is easy. Now we just use Eric's language and it figures it out. It knows everything. But at the time, that's a hard thing to do. And so this was also part of the vision where user control applications and no siloing. So what's important about it? Yeah, synchronization. I keep emphasizing that. Basically, the platform would do this for you, and yeah, it would support collaboration. We talked about that. I don't think we did not envision at the time quite such real-time collaboration, which is weird because I knew about Croquet at the time, but never put two and two together. So anyway, here's how it might work. We have a user here on one side, and that user has two devices right over here. And this is the service, essentially. And what could happen is, this is the App Store, basically. You upload a new app to the App Store. Then the user connects and buys the app and downloads it. And so it shows up over here. And the user continues to do stuff. And maybe he's working with another app, and he's got some data here. And later he syncs up again, and that data finds its way to the service, which is not just an app store, but is also the backup for their data. And the site where this data is stable so you can collaborate and do all these things. And, later on, the user connects from a different device, and they sync up, and they get the new app that they had loaded from the other device, and they get the new changed data. And so this is how things are going to envision to work. So yeah, again, orthogonal synchronization. This is probably the first written reference to that phrase. And it's tied to, of course, orthogonal persistence of saving the state. And so in that sense, we're talking not only about app stores in the sense of store, in the sense of shop, but store in the sense of storage, of memory. And what else did we do? There was program equals data. Yes, this never gets old, and we advocated for treating the program as data that needs to be synced as well. And of course, that means that the apps would update when there are new versions. And this, of course, is dynamic program update, and doing this without shutting down your program and rebooting, right? A small talker always will be. So that was kind of the vision that we had there. Yeah, capability-based security was also a thing, right? So this eventually manifested in Newspeak as the OCAP language model that we use. Yeah, portability. I was one of the people who came up with the acronym WORA. I'm sure there's differences of opinion who came up with it, but write once, run anywhere at Java. It never worked for Java, but I knew it could work because it worked for Squeak, which ran bit for bit compatible across anything, right? So it can be done, could have been done, and we were advocating for that. Yeah, we can skip this, kind of repeats this, you know. I do want to show you this slide because that's the plan. What is the business proposal here? Sell apps. It's an app store, right? And other variations of this were, you know, different models business-wise of who you'd work with, but they're somewhat interesting. So one was, partner with Google, and Google hosts this thing, right? The Play Store, but this is before the Play Store, before Android, before Chromebooks, before the iPhone, before all of this stuff. Another possibility, the mobile carriers, they were interested in this because they were kind of being disintermediated. They never succeeded, but they were certainly open to it. And the last option, try and get Nokia to use this stuff, right? So remember Nokia? Nokia was the premier manufacturer of mobile phones. Apple didn't make phones. Google didn't make phones. None of these companies did anything with phones. But the idea of having this system on mobile devices sold through the phone manufacturer, well, gee, that might work. Who knows? But anyway, you could do all of the above. And that was our presentation for the VCs. And now we'll go back and, this is why this is still broken, for reasons that I don't have time to get into all the technicalities of things, but if you go offline, then things stop. That I think I know how to fix this, but this is why this demo is so delicate, because if the internet connection here went, then the whole thing would be shot. Full disclosure. But somewhere here, we do have a non-collaborative. This is the same presentation running on the non-collaborative Newspeak platform, so it'll work. And we'll make it a little bit bigger. Maybe we can even make it full screen. Yeah. So this is where we left off. And, the venture capitalists did not buy this. My entrepreneurial skills are not what one might hope, it turns out. But one of the things that one of them said, is still burned in my mind. They said, we won't do this. This is a platform play, a horizontal play. We don't do that sort of thing. But the next thing he said is, Sun Microsystems should do this. And I was working at Sun Microsystems, I think, you don't say. How come I never thought of that? Of course, I had thought of that, and so this is another tale of woe as to how this went about. So, you all know this is Duke. This is a beautiful picture that James Gosling sent out when Oracle acquired Sun. And, so Duke at the grave. But let's look at Duke at the cradle. Where was Duke born? Duke was born, let's make sure we don't have sound because the sound is annoying on this thing. But this is a video James made about the Star 7, this mobile device that was the sort of the origin story of Java way back in the early 90s. They built this mobile device, and Duke was this kind of mascot for it, as you'll see in a moment. See, there's Duke. And he was the Clippy for the Star 7, right? And then later he got demoted to just a dead mascot because whatever. But Java started on the client, and then there were applets, right? Java was supposed to run in the browser with applets. It was supposed to do what JavaScript does, right? But it didn't for various reasons. Some of them Java's fault, that it wasn't well suited, and some of it was just ahead of its time, and things were too slow and whatever. But Sun had been looking at, it started on the client, and eventually they switched catastrophically to the server. But when I brought this idea to my management in Sun, the people at JavaSoft that had been trying to make the damn thing work on a client for years, they were amenable to this because they knew that their thing would not work on the client, right? They knew that didn't work. And I basically told them, you remember how I got here with the Smalltalk engine that you bought so that you could make your damn language run fast? And so that became the hotspot VM. So we still have that lying around somewhere, buried, and that is a great client. That comes up instantly, that has native widgets that respond. It doesn't have AWT, it doesn't have all the genius UI things you came up with. It actually works, because it's Smalltalk. And what we can do with that is, you're already at the stage where you're updating JVMs, which are everywhere over the wire, that had just started. And, you know, that whole runtime is a couple of megabytes. Just smuggle it in as an extra, just push it out, and then you'll have a client runtime. And then we'll do this app store. And the higher up in at the medium levels that I was talking to, well, this seems interesting, but of course we don't have the authority to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to talk to the higher ups. And what do you think the higher ups told me? You know the graduate, this line about plastics? One word, son, thin clients, right? So this is a Sunray. At the time, this is, I think, the picture I found, I think this is a first generation Sunray. They were on the second or third at the time, but they had just released a new Sunray. A Sunray is basically a very expensive glorified dumb terminal. It is an IBM 3270, essentially a thing with, if you know what that is, it has a coax cable that can send enormous amounts of data, but ends up displaying next to nothing on the screen. And that is, and just the industrial design team that made this nice purple plastic bus probably would cost more than it would have cost them to productize Strongtalk. But that was the state religion, and so they would not hear of this because what you're proposing is a thick client. That cannot be. And so that sort of ends the tale of woe in a way, because those were my attempts to get this off the ground. And then we started the Newspeak project. That's a different story. And we got somewhere until the crash of 2008 ended that tale very sadly, because otherwise we might have made it work. So in the end, the App Store we wanted, which could have been, would have let users customize their apps, let them compose freely, no siloing. They would run online and offline and synchronize, including the no versioning. They would do dynamic live update, and with capability-based security. And yeah, it never happened because I don't have any skill at selling or convincing people, and that's my story. Thank you.
Plenty of time for questions.
No questions? That's great. Okay.
What were the more specific reasons why you didn't like Gmail?
What I didn't like was I wanted the capabilities of a native client. It just felt that it well, at the time it didn't work offline. Like if you use Thunderbird or God was Mother, it's an email client running everything. Your email's there. If you at the time you don't have an internet connection, you can get on the plane and look at your email all the same, right? You couldn't do that, right? That sort of motivated this whole thing. That's what motivated the local first movement that started many years later, is the fact that if your internet connection is slow or intermittent or insecure or non-existent, or if you have a connection but your cloud provider is down because they crashed or they have a denial of service, a million reasons why you can't get to that thing, you are up the creek without the paddle. That's the fundamental thing. I forget, but it just felt wrong as a, UI-wise, and everything felt lousy, and I said, yeah, and besides that, it didn't even do search well, right, for the email. But that's separate. But really, the reasons why I felt that, yeah, it's amazing you can do this on a web browser, but I needed to do other things that wouldn't do. Ben.
So I was there at the funeral of Sun, and I feel like Sun was a little bit spoiled because the fish were jumping in the boat, and so they were focused on building the biggest boat possible. And
is the microphone not working? I think it's working.
Can you hear me?
Can you ramp it up? Because in the back they could not hear you.
So my comment is basically, it seemed like the economics of Java were such that it was selling servers, and Sun maybe didn't have the foresight to want to branch out to other things. It seemed like it would have been possible to fork Hotspot and use it for different things, but that didn't happen. Do you have any insight into why that might have been?
Well, certainly there was not a lot of imagination there. So you didn't need to fork Hotspot to do this, but you know, in this particular case, but other things perhaps. But yeah, I don't know that I have insight into why, but they were, you know, the management they ran the company into the ground, right? There's no question, and it was just with that kind of thing, there was no hope, really. I mean, this is a long story that we could get into about personalities, which I'm not going to discuss here, but I don't have insight except it was badly run and it lost its way. Eric, you had a question at one point.
Yeah, so you make it sound as if like this thing was like super easy to build.
No.
But now
Very
you
hard
have
to
like
build.
you still had bugs. So were the VCs right or wrong?
The VCs were wrong for the simple reason that, you know, whether we had a business or plan, we would have an app store at eventually of some sort, even if it did half of this. Then someone would have bought it as a technology transfer story, right? Because once Jobs got on stage and said, there's an app store, you know, all the lights would go on, and if you had anything that could do any part of that. So the VCs were wrong, but of course it's not that easy. This thing that I just showed you is something that I've cooked up in the past couple of months in my spare time, because all the hard work is what Yoshiki does and Vanessa have done, except for this idea of that I can slide it into the platform and not make people do that. And so, and it has, sure, of course it has bugs. Anything I write has bugs. That's why I have to work with, what someone said, work with people smarter than you, Alan, whatever. I don't know how Alan finds people smarter than him, but I have no problem finding people smarter than me. So, sure, that's why someone should do that. Now this, at the time when we had the slides, this was all vapor for the VCs, right? None of this worked, and we had only the haziest idea how to make it work, right? We eventually got the object capability to work. We had a fast VM, which we didn't use, but we could have gotten to that point. The synchronization is a hard story. I mean, the key thing here was the insight that I could use Croquet, which I could have used back then if I wasn't so distracted by their shiny 3D stuff that I didn't even think about their synchronization model. And that still wouldn't have solved the offline part, which is the hard part. And there's been, I don't know how many years now of CRDT research where this is finally in reach, right? So now I can see how I can finish it. We had thoughts about how to do it, and maybe we would have figured it out or not. But yes, it would be, this required VCs. That's why it needed VCs. We needed a team of smart people who would probably work on this for several years and so forth. But the VCs were not right. Dave? I've looked at Unison, and I'm not, that's a long discussion, but I'm not necessarily a fan. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Done?
Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.